Hey everyone, and welcome to the Deep Dive. Ready to explore some wild prophecies and do some serious critical thinking.
Today's deep dive is especially interesting because we'll be comparing two very different perspectives on the future.
Okay, lay it on me.
Well, first, we've got Rudolf Steiner.
Oh, I've heard of him.
He was an esotericist who predicted some pretty major upheavals and a spiritual rebirth for humanity.
Intense. And the second perspective.
The second is from Paul Amadeus Dirnach, a language teacher who claimed he actually experienced life in the year 3906.
Whoa, okay, we're going way into the future with that one.
We are, but before we get too lost in all the predictions, I think it's important to remember that we need to approach these ideas with a healthy dose of critical thinking.
Right, like Morpheus offering Neo the red pill in the Matrix.
Yeah.
We're going to see some mind-blowing stuff, but got to keep our heads on straight.
Exactly. Prophecies are fascinating, but we can't just accept them blindly. We need to analyze them, question them, and see how they hold up to scrutiny.
Okay, so let's start with Steiner. He had some pretty intense ideas, especially about cycles of destruction and rebirth, right?
Yes, Steiner believed that history moves in these grand cycles, kind of like a cosmic heartbeat, driven by powerful spiritual forces.
So not just random events, but a bigger pattern at play.
Right. And he saw humanity caught in this tug of war between opposing forces.
Oh, like what? Good versus evil?
Well, not exactly. He called them the Ahrimanic and the Luciferic.
Okay, those sound pretty ominous. Who are those guys?
Think of it this way. The Ahrimanic represents a focus on material pursuits, like wealth, power, technology, all the stuff that can kind of trap us in the material world.
Ah, so like getting so caught up in getting the latest gadget that you forget about things like, I don't know, connecting with people or appreciating nature.
Exactly. And then you've got the Luciferic force, which represents illusion and spiritual escapism.
Okay, so that's like the opposite. Ignoring the real world completely and chasing fantasies or getting lost in abstract ideas.
Right. And Steiner believed that getting pulled too far in either direction, either getting too materialistic or too lost in illusion, was a recipe for disaster. He saw it as a key factor driving those cycles of destruction and rebirth.
So how do we avoid getting sucked into those extremes? What's the antidote?
Steiner called it cultivating Michaelic forces.
Michaelic forces. Who's Michael?
It's not a person, it's more like a principle, representing wisdom, balance, and a connection to higher spiritual truths.
So it's like finding that sweet spot between the material and the spiritual.
Yeah,
right.
right.
Being grounded in reality, but also open to something bigger than ourselves.
Exactly. He believed developing these inner qualities was essential for navigating the turbulent times he predicted, including a pretty intense period he called the Grave of Civilization.
Whoa, grave of civilization. That sounds a bit apocalyptic. When did he think this was going to happen?
He placed it around the year 2000.
Oh, well, we made it past that, didn't we?
We did, and Steiner also predicted a golden age would emerge around the year 2086.
Okay, so maybe we're on our way to that golden age now.
Possibly. But let's not forget our critical thinking caps. Steiner's predictions are fascinating, but we need to examine them carefully.
Right, so it's not about saying he was definitely right or wrong. It's about using his ideas as a way to understand the complexities of history and maybe to see where we might be headed.
Exactly. It's a framework for thinking about the big picture, even if it's not a perfect crystal ball.
I like that, a framework. It's like a map that helps us navigate through some pretty uncharted territory.
And just like with a map, we need to use our judgment, our critical thinking skills to determine the best route.
Okay, I'm ready to explore this map. Where should we go next?
Let's take a closer look at that grave of civilization idea. How do we assess whether Steiner was right about that, especially since we've already passed the year 2000?
Yeah, good point. What would count as evidence?
Well, remember, he wasn't talking about a literal grave, like the end of the world as we know it.
Oh, okay, so more like a figurative grave.
Right. He meant a time of profound crisis, a kind of breakdown of society as we know it, driven by excessive materialism and a loss of connection to spiritual values.
Yeah, I can see that. When you think about it, the last few decades have seen a pretty intense focus on material things. Consumerism, technology, always needing the newest, the best.
Exactly. And those trends have had real consequences. Look at the state of the environment, the growing gap between the rich and the poor, the feeling of isolation and disconnection that so many people experience.
So maybe Steiner was onto something. But haven't there also been positive changes? Like there's a lot more awareness of environmental issues now. People are talking about mindfulness and spirituality more than ever. Maybe this is the start of that golden age he predicted.
It's possible. But remember, critical thinking isn't about picking and choosing evidence to fit our preferred narrative. We need to look at the whole picture.
Right. No cherry picking allowed.
We have to weigh the evidence carefully, consider different interpretations, and be open to the possibility that things might not be as simple as they seem.
It's like being a detective. You got to follow the clues wherever they lead, even if it takes you in a direction you weren't expecting.
Exactly. And sometimes the most important clues are the ones that challenge our assumptions.
Okay, I'm ready to channel my inner Sherlock Holmes. What other mysteries can we unravel with Steiner's framework?
Well, let's say, for argument's sake, that his idea of millennial cycles is valid.
Okay, let's play with that idea.
If each millennium brings new challenges and opportunities for growth, what might happen after 2086, the supposed start of that golden age?
Ooh, good question. And how would that connect to Dirnach's supposed experience of the year 3906? We're talking about a huge span of time here.
We are, and it's fascinating to think about. Using Steiner's framework, we might imagine a period of incredible spiritual and scientific progress in the millennium following 2086. A time where humanity embraces a more holistic worldview and uses technology to benefit everyone, not just a select few.
Like a real utopia.
It could be. But then following that, maybe there's a resurgence of those old temptations, the allure of materialism or the pull towards escapism, perhaps amplified by even more advanced technology than we can imagine today.
So, like a cosmic game of snakes and ladders, we climb towards enlightenment, only to slide back down into old habits. But maybe each time we climb back up, we get a little bit wiser, a little bit closer to true understanding.
That's a great analogy. It highlights how important it is to stay vigilant, to keep cultivating those mitalic forces, even when things seem good.
Like Steiner's saying, don't get complacent, folks. Even in a golden age, the forces of materialism and illusion are still lurking around, waiting to trip you up.
Exactly. And that's why critical thinking is so crucial. We need to be aware of those forces, recognize when they're trying to influence us, and make conscious choices that align with our highest aspirations.
It's like we need a superpower. The ability to see through the illusions and make decisions based on wisdom, not just on what feels good in the moment.
You got it. And speaking of seeing through illusions, that's a perfect segue to our next topic, Paul Dirnach's alleged journey to the year 3906.
Okay, now this is where things get really wild. Buckle up, everyone. We're about to time travel.
Dirnach's story is, well, it's one of those things that really makes you wonder what's actually possible. We're talking about a regular language teacher claiming he traveled to the year 3906, all while in a coma.
Yeah, that's straight out of science fiction, like Total Recall level stuff. But Dirnach didn't describe some dystopian nightmare. He talked about a utopia.
Right, and that contrast is what makes it so fascinating. It wasn't a world destroyed by war or ecological collapse, but a society that had achieved a remarkable level of harmony and advancement.
Okay, so paint me a picture. What did this future utopia actually look like?
Well, Dirnach has described a global government, but not the kind that usually makes us think of Big Brother. This one seemed focused on promoting intellectual and spiritual growth. There was this sense of global cooperation and shared purpose. Resources were abundant, too.
It's like in Star Trek, the Federation, right? Where different planets and cultures work together.
Exactly. Great comparison. And like in Star Trek, technology plays a big role in Dirnach's 3906. He described things that would blown his mind back in the early 1900s. Flying cars, advanced communication systems, even holographic displays.
Whoa! Princess Leia sending a message to Obi-Wan.
No.
But unlike Star Wars, where tech is often used for weapons, Dirnach seemed to suggest that in this future, technology serves human well-being and consciousness expansion.
That's right. He wrote about a society that wasn't obsessed with material wealth. Their focus was on knowledge, creativity, spiritual development. It's like they'd reached this level of evolution we can only dream of.
It all sounds pretty incredible.
Yep.
But this is where we got to put our critical thinking hats back on, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, as fascinating as Dirnach's story is, what evidence do we have? It could all just be a really vivid coma dream.
That's a fair point. And to be honest, we don't have scientific proof of time travel or consciousness transfer like that. But the thing is, Dirnach's account is incredibly detailed and internally consistent.
Okay, I see what you...
And he wrote about things completely unknown in his time, so it's not so easy to just dismiss it as, making it all up.
So maybe we need to take a page from Spock's book. Search for a logical explanation, but also be open to the idea that maybe we don't know everything about reality yet.
Exactly. Just because something challenges our current scientific understanding doesn't mean we should automatically toss it out the window. But of course, we need to be critical, avoid jumping to conclusions.
Okay, so even if we entertain this idea of a utopian 3906, how do we square that with the problems we're facing right now? Dirnach did talk about some major events that happened between his time and that distant future, right?
He did, and this is where the idea of historical cycles comes back into play. Dirnach described periods of progress followed by, kind of a step back, just like Steiner's concept of alternating phases of advancement and decline.
So even in this supposedly perfect future, humanity didn't escape those ups and downs.
According to Dirnach, no. He wrote about an attempt to colonize Mars that failed, a devastating nuclear war in the 24th century. After that war, society collapsed, and he called it the Second Dark Age.
It's like a reminder that progress isn't always a straight line. 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of thing. Even if we reach a golden age, there's always that potential for things to go wrong. Like, haven't we learned from history?
Exactly. And that's what makes Dirnach's story, even with the utopian elements, not necessarily optimistic. It suggests that even with incredible technological and social progress, those self-destructive tendencies we have, well, they might stick around.
So, big question. How do we break the cycle? Steiner and Dirnach both seem to suggest that the key is, some kind of fundamental shift in human consciousness. But what does that actually look like in practice?
That is the big question. And it's not just about analyzing things intellectually.
Well,
It's about looking inward at our own beliefs and motivations, facing our own, less than perfect sides.
so time to get introspective. Like a superhero facing their inner demons before taking on the big bad villain.
Exactly. And just like a superhero discovers their power from within, that's where the real potential for change lies in each of us.
But how do we unlock that potential? Steiner and Dirnach weren't exactly clear on the specifics.
True, they weren't. Maybe it's intentional. Like, this consciousness shift is something you can't just put into a manual. It's a personal journey of self-discovery.
So no magic formula, no set of rules. It's more about, cultivating a way of being, a certain attitude towards ourselves and the world.
Right, and this is where critical thinking comes full circle. It's not just analyzing info and challenging assumptions out there. It's about questioning our own motives, our biases, our habits of thinking and behaving.
So critical thinking is more than just a mental exercise. It's actually a tool for personal transformation.
Exactly. It's developing the ability to see ourselves and the world with more clarity and compassion. And I think that's the foundation for the kind of consciousness shift that both Steiner and Dirnach were pointing towards.
It's like we need to become more like, Professor X from X-Men, able to see things from different perspectives and tapped into the power of the human mind.
I like that analogy. And just like Professor X used his powers to mentor and guide others, we need to find ways to support each other on this journey of inner transformation.
Because, let's be real, if we want to create a future where humanity truly thrives, a future where we solve the problems we face and achieve peace and understanding,
Yes.
well, that's going to take all of us working together.
Absolutely. And that brings us back to the core message of both Steiner and Dirnach. The future isn't something that just happens to us.
Okay.
We create it through our choices, our actions, and our willingness to evolve individually and as a species.
It's not about waiting for some prophecy to come true, but actively building a better future.
Exactly.
Right.
And that's a powerful reminder that each one of us has a role to play in shaping the destiny of humanity.
So we've looked at 2 very different visions of the future. Steiner's cycles and spiritual forces, Dirnach's first-hand account of 3906. They offer these glimpses of what might be, and both highlight the importance of critical thinking, inner transformation, collective action.
And now, as we wrap up this deep dive, it's time for a final, bold prediction, one inspired by both Steiner and Dirnach.
Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat. What does the future hold?
I believe that by the year 3906, maybe even sooner, humanity will reach a crossroads. We'll have technology that could reshape the world in ways we can barely even imagine now.
Wow, okay.
We'll have the potential to solve so many of those age-old problems: poverty, hunger, disease.
That would be incredible.
But we'll also face new challenges.
Like what?
Think about ethical dilemmas because of all this advanced tech, ecological crises, because our planet is, pretty fragile, social and political tensions because everything's changing so fast.
So it's not a guaranteed utopia. It's a future with both risks and opportunities, a lot like what we're dealing with now, just amplified.
Right. And the path we end up taking depends on the choices we're making today, both as individuals and as a society.
It's kind of overwhelming to think about, but also it's empowering to realize we have agency. We're not just helpless bystanders. We can actually shape the course of history.
Exactly. And that brings us back to what this whole deep dive has been about. Critical thinking isn't just some abstract concept.
Right.
It's about understanding the forces that are shaping our world, examining our own beliefs, and making choices that are in line with the future we want.
It's like waking up and seeing the world for what it truly is, like Neo in the Matrix when he starts to see the code.
Yes. Critical thinking helps us see past the surface, question everything, make decisions based on reason and evidence, instead of just blindly following what everyone else is doing.
So how do we get better at this critical thinking thing? I'm ready to level up my brain.
Well, the first step is being aware of our own biases. We all have these preconceived notions that affect how we see things. The key is to acknowledge them and be willing to challenge them.
Oh, yeah. It's like that saying, it's not what you don't know that gets you into trouble, it's what you know for sure that just ain't so.
Exactly. We got to be open to the possibility that we might be wrong, that there might be perspectives we haven't even considered.
So, step one,
Mm-hmm.
check our egos and get a little bit humble, right? What's next?
Next, make it a habit to ask questions. Don't just absorb information passively.
Okay.
Challenge it. Ask, who's saying this? Why are they saying it? What's their agenda? What proof do they have? Are there other viewpoints I'm missing?
Like being our own personal fact checkers.
Yep. And don't be afraid to dig deeper, research different sources, get a really well-rounded view of things.
So critical thinking isn't just about being skeptical, it's about being curious
Exactly.
and informed.
Yes, exactly. And here's another thing. Don't underestimate the power of your gut feeling.
My intuition.
Yeah, sometimes your intuition can pick up on things that your logical mind might miss, inconsistencies or red flags.
So it's about balancing logic and intuition, head and heart.
Right. Critical thinking isn't just cold, hard analysis. It involves empathy, compassion, thinking about how our decisions impact others.
It's like Yoda says, feel the force, you must.
Well, maybe not in those exact words. But yeah, the idea is that critical thinking requires us to be fully present, using all our abilities, approaching the world with a sense of curiosity, wonder, and a real dedication to the truth.
Okay, so we've got our critical thinking tools sharpened and ready. But how do we use them to tackle the big challenges we're facing as a species?
That's where things get really exciting. When we start thinking critically about the world, we start seeing possibilities for change.
For our progress.
For creating a future that's more just, more sustainable, more fulfilling for everybody.
It's like in a superhero movie, when the hero suddenly realizes they have the power to make a real difference, to fight for what's right.
And like those heroes who often face impossible odds, we have some pretty serious challenges ahead of us, don't we?
We do.
Climate change, social inequality, political divides, all this tech disruption. They're complex problems, and they're going to need creative solutions and people working together.
So critical thinking isn't just about personal growth, it's also about taking action together.
Yes, absolutely. We need to apply these skills not just to our own lives, but to our communities, our societies, our whole world.
It's like we need to become a global team of superheroes.
Yeah.
Combining our strengths to fight the good fight.
I love that. And every superhero team needs a leader. We need visionaries, people who can inspire us and guide us through this complex future.
People like Professor X, using wisdom and compassion to unite humanity.
Exactly. But we also need all those everyday heroes, the people who stand up for what's right, challenge injustice, speak truth to power, and work to make a world that's fairer, more sustainable, more just for everyone.
It's a big task, but if there's one thing we've learned from looking at these prophecies and predictions, it's that the future isn't set in stone. It's constantly changing based on our choices, our actions, and our collective imagination.
That's a message of hope and power. It means we're not just along for the ride on this planet. We have a say in where we're going, and we have the power to create a brighter future.
So to everyone listening, go out there and be the hero of your own story.
Yes.
Cultivate your critical thinking skills, embrace your inner visionary, and find ways to make a positive impact.
The future is waiting to be written.
And you have a role to play. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the future. Keep questioning, keep exploring, keep imagining those possibilities. Until next time.